Hi guys, it's Teresa. Welcome back to my channel. As you can probably tell by the title, today I wanted to make a video dedicated to Game of Thrones. If you haven't been living under a rock, then you will know that the last and final season of Game of Thrones has just aired and there's a lot of talk happening everywhere, and also I have just finished myself A Storm of Swords, which is the third book in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. So in general, there's been a lot of Game of Thrones going on in my brain recently, and I asked you guys on Instagram if you wanted me to do a discussion video, both talking about this book and also about the latest season. So you said yes, and here I am, basically. First, I want to talk about A Storm of Swords in a way that's not spoilery to the book, but spoilery to the show, if that makes sense, because later in the video, I'm going to talk about the spoilers regarding season 8, and I feel like you will have probably also seen season 3 for that. So you want to have seen the show to watch this video and not be spoiled, but I won't spoil the books because there are some differences, and I think it's quite fun to explore them yourself, even if you've already seen the show. So just to make that clear, spoilers for the show, no spoilers for the book. Okay, so let's talk about the book. This one has 1,128 pages, and it took me a whole 3 weeks to finish it because I was not always super motivated to pick this up. As a little side note, I just did a video on how to find more motivation to read, so you can go watch that if you haven't seen it yet. So to help me along a little bit in that journey of like making myself excited to read it, I also downloaded the audiobook because Audible currently has like a really cheap deal going for people that have had it once but like aren't currently subscribed. So that was pretty cool. I only pay like $2.99 a month right now. So I decided to download that audiobook, and I was listening to it whenever I was going places. So basically when I was home and had time to read, I would only read the physical copy, but on my way to like uni or grocery shopping, running errands, I would try to always be listening to the audiobook in between to kind of just get me a little further. And it was actually really, really motivating because then I could come home from like going grocery shopping and actually skip ahead a chapter or two in the actual physical book. And that was really cool because I was like, I'm being productive, multitasking here. I will say that this is one of the books where when you listen to it on audio, you want to really pay close attention. I had to skip and replay several parts when I was just like drifting off mentally at times. So like I caught myself not actually paying attention, and it wasn't one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna jump back in where it is now. I really wanted to like closely listen, so I kept again replaying some parts. There's just a lot packed into this book. There isn't really passages that you kind of just want to, skip over. At least I don't think so. It's very dense, but in a good way. In terms of like a lot happens, and if you want to fully understand everything that happens, you really want to fully read the whole thing. So I would recommend listening or reading it closely, at least, so you don't feel lost at any point. Also, I was quite unlucky in my listening experience because there are some sex scenes in this book, and it seemed that they would only ever happen when I was listening to the audiobook, and it was so awkward, especially when you know that like the characters in the books are so much younger. Like Daenerys is, I don't know, 13 in the books, and then you have this 44-year-old man just kissing her, and it was not fun. Not fun. Or when you hear like the old narrator narrate a sex scene between children, because again, they're all in like their early teens, and it takes some getting used to. But now let's get to the book itself. I loved it. I think this was for sure a 5-star read for me. Even though I knew the basic plot outline, I loved getting to know the characters much more in depth and like kind of refresh my memory, because as we all know, I have a terrible memory to begin with, and it really helps to get to read it all again in more detail at length like it is here. There's also a lot of supplementary backstory to characters that is kind of just either insinuated or completely ignored in the show. So I think for that alone, it's very, very helpful to also read the book. I think what also really works for this book is that it is quite fast-paced for such a long fantasy novel. A lot of really important events happen in this book. Just to name a few, again, if you've seen the show, you know about all of these. The Red Wedding, you have Joffrey's death, you have Tywin's death, the battle at the Wall with Stannis and the Wildlings, and all that stuff. So I feel like literally in every single perspective, there's a major thing going on, and like there's these climaxes all throughout the book. And that's really motivating, because nothing is more fun than a fast-paced fantasy book that's still very good at world building and very good at like constructing these storylines, so it doesn't just feel arbitrary, like, oh, let's just have something exciting happening. But no, these things are like the end of the road to a lot of developments that were started in earlier books, and you know, them all coming to this like culmination in this one felt really amazing. I also really enjoyed reading from all these perspectives, genuinely. There was so much character development, and especially I really enjoyed Sansa's perspective, because knowing where her arc is supposedly going to end up at the end of the series, if we believe that the end of season 8 is also the ending of these books, then it's really fun to like kind of have that pre-knowledge of where she's gonna end up and like look back on her journey. And I really like that she grows into a much stronger character in this book, and she becomes much more mature. And it's just really enjoyable to follow, genuinely. Like, I feel like at the beginning of the series, Sansa was one of my least favorite characters, because she seemed so naive and stupid and genuinely annoying. But yeah, she's growing into herself more, and it's a really fun journey to follow. In general, I think that this is one of the books where a lot of the characters that are going to end up being bigger characters kind of grow more into that potential and grow more into the person that they're eventually supposed to become. And again, character development is fun to read about. I will say that since I still have some memories of the show, I can't read this book. I couldn't have read this book in a vacuum. So I had some overlay from the show, and I felt like there were some scenes in the book that were done better in the show. Like, for example, the Red Wedding was much more emotional in the show. And at first I thought it was just because it was my first time encountering it, but then I watched a video, I will link it in the description, of somebody comparing or like listing his 5 things that the show did better than the books and the 5 things that the books did better than the show as regards to season 3. I really found myself agreeing with him on a lot of it, and one of the things he said is that they made the setup for the Red Wedding much more involved. Like, we cared much more about Rob as a character, so we cared much more when he died, and we cared much more about everything leading up to the Red Wedding. And then the Red Wedding itself was done in much more detail, so you felt more involved and more invested. And in the book, that wasn't as much the case. I still felt devastated by it, because I knew it was coming, I knew I couldn't prevent it, I knew none of the characters could prevent it, and like Arya and the Hound literally coming 2 minutes too late is the most painful thing in book and television history. But regardless, it felt a little bit rushed, and I think a lot of the emotions I felt still originally stemmed from that moment in the TV show and me remembering how I felt about it then, rather than actually from the event happening in the book, if that makes sense. But overall, I think this is definitely a series worth getting into and worth making your way through, however slow that may be. I just think if you enjoy fantasy stories that are well constructed, where the characters feel so real and seem to be making very independent individual decisions separate from what the author wants them to do. Again, crazy as that may sound, like, I really recommend the series. I think George R.R. Martin does a wonderful job there. He just sets up his characters and kind of sends them off on their own. And I have heard that in later books that kind of comes at a detriment to him, because there's a lot of meandering, there's a lot of we don't know what we're gonna do now, because they're all off on their own tangents, and we don't know how they're gonna ever come back together to one point, to like a focus point. But still, I still prefer this type of storytelling, because it feels less formulaic and much more genuine and authentic. And even if that means I'm gonna have to read like a ton of non-content to get to the good parts again, it still, again, feels more real than most other fantasy stories. So if this sounds appealing, even if it's intimidating, I recommend checking these books out. And again, I also recommend listening to the audiobooks on the side. And with that being out of the way, I think we should jump right into a little bit of a chat about the show. Are you ready, guys? I'm gonna say straight off the bat, I'm not gonna do like any sort of analytical anything. There's a million videos like this out there that you can watch, and probably these people are much smarter and have better things to say than me, so I'm just gonna go off the cuff here. No particular idea what I'm gonna say. But first of all, did I like the show, the ending of the show, the season 8? No, is the easy answer. And I think a lot of people feel like that right now. And then you have the other camp of people saying they really enjoyed it, they don't understand, well, they do kind of understand why people didn't like it, but they say it's because the people who didn't like it just didn't get the ending they wanted. And this is the I don't know, the most infuriating argument that I've heard. It genuinely is so belittling. Like, it's genuinely condescending to say, you just don't like it because you didn't get the ending you wanted. That is completely ignoring the bigger problems. The first of which is that they have just completely rushed the story along and done it much quicker than they should have. This is not me saying that, that's a genuine fact that D&D have admitted to. They've said HBO had literally given them like a blank check basically and said like, do as many seasons as you want, because they're cashing out on that like crazy, obviously. George R.R. Martin has also said it should be longer, but they wanted to go on and do other things like Star Wars and whatever. And they were, I guess, too possessive, arrogant, I don't know what, to just have somebody else write the rest of the seasons. And so they said, no, we're gonna do 8 seasons. That's, I think, the biggest detriment of the show, is that the story had so much build-up. And when you have a story with so much build-up, you can't just end it like that. You can't just go, and now it's over. You actually have to have the same like time at least devoted to the winding down. And I don't really mean like winding down after the final climax, but winding down the different threads, the story threads that have been started. They also need to be spread out over an equally long amount of time. Otherwise, it just feels wrong. And that's exactly what happened here, in my opinion. They should have done, I don't know, 9 seasons, 10 seasons. They should have had the ending with the Nightwalkers in a different season, and then have Daenerys, the Mad Queen, in the last season. It should have been more time dedicated to all these individual threads and not wrapping them up in like a hurry in the course of 2 episodes. That's not good storytelling. And that's just a fact of the situation. Like, it's not about how it ended. I don't care who's on the Iron Throne. I don't care who's ruling or who dies. I mean, I do, but not in the sense of this is gonna make me like or dislike the show. I care about stories being told well, and they did tell a really good story for so many seasons, and then they just ran out of time, essentially, or steam or motivation to also dedicate enough effort to concluding that story as well. And that's just the tragedy of this entire thing. It genuinely feels like such a waste almost, looking back on the earlier seasons that were so good and that set up so many potential things. And that's really the crux of the matter, in my opinion, is there was so much potential in the show. There were so many things like little prophecies and little foreshadowing moments and hints here and there, and just tiny little things that left you excited and for wanting to know where that would go. Like, how is this little thing going to impact the rest of the story? Only to then find out basically that none of these even mattered. I retweeted a really interesting and kind of salty but also fun thread recently that basically just showed all the pointless things in Game of Thrones, and there's a ton of them. Like little moments, little hints of things to come that completely did not matter in the end. And that's really the issue. It's not, again, it's not that Daenerys went mad. I am happy for her to be mad. I just need there to be a believable, structured, clear, logical way from her at the end of season 7, having an army and 3 dragons, No, that wasn't the end of season 7. That was somewhere in season 7, let's say. An army and 3 dragons and all the power in the world and the love of her people and like a good heart and a positive person to get her from that point A to the point B where she destroys the city of innocence for no good reason and dies in the matter of 2 seconds. That is what I want to know. This process is the interesting bit. The interesting bit isn't where she ends up, really, in my opinion. It's the journey. And you can't just skip over parts of that. And that's really what they did here. They skipped so much character development. They skipped so many important moments. And even within the last episode, the time jumps were mind-boggling to me. Like, if you had just filled that time, you could have done at least another episode with that story. Like, the time jump between between Jon killing Daenerys and then the scene with Tyrion and like the council of like lords or whatever. I was so confused. No joke. I was like, what is happening right now? Where are we? It's almost like they would have written like 3 weeks later at the bottom of the screen, but they didn't, because that's out of character, I guess, for the show. But it just made me confused. It's like, how, where, why, what is happening right now? I don't understand. And then they kind of copped out of actually answering to the question of how this whole development is even logical by just skipping the whole part. Like, how did Jon get captured? No one saw him kill Daenerys. Daenerys and the dragon just disappeared. Why would the Unsullied even capture Jon? Like, if they even thought that he had killed Daenerys, they would literally instantly kill him, I guarantee it. They wouldn't capture him and wait for like the forces of Winterfell to besiege the town. Like, what? Why? Why would they capture him? It makes no sense. They've literally just proven 2 minutes before that they're very much capable of randomly killing innocents because they're under orders from their queen. So you're telling me they see the murderer of their queen and are like, we better put him in chains and wait for other people to have leverage over us to hand him back to them again. Like, no, just no. I don't buy it. And that's really the main emotion that I had when watching the show. It's like, I don't buy any of this. This to me seems like very poorly written fan fiction. And honestly, this is just the main reason for my disappointment. It's not that Daenerys died and that Bran is king, even though that's ridiculous. It's really just that there was so much potential in this show. There was, just imagine the amount of work and time and money and effort that went into creating these first few seasons. The dedication with which the crew and the cast devoted themselves to making this one of the best shows we've ever had, undoubtedly. And then the writers just going, we don't really care about all that because we just want to get out and we don't want to honor all that. We really just want to get out. So we're just going to cut it off right here. And that really is, it's just sad. It makes me genuinely sad. And I honestly, if I were part of the cast and the crew, I would be fucking pissed. Just the squandered potential of the story and the characters that never got a chance to fully develop into who they were supposed to be because they were forced into a direction that suited the story best. And it's just, again, it's sad. I'm not even mad, I'm just sad. I'm very, very sad. And I think, again, like, if you enjoyed the show, then that's fine. But don't go telling people who didn't that it's just because they're petulant children who want what they want, and if they don't get it, they're upset. That's not it, okay? That's not it, I can promise you. Maybe there are some people who like that, who are like, no, Daenerys would never go mad. Sure. But I think the majority of people are just disappointed. And because they're following a story that was well written and well constructed and going well, kind of, and this just reminds me of my experience with the Poppy War, except that I didn't spend as much time to actually get invested. But it was also, again, a book where the first half was amazing and the second half was garbage. So here we have the same, people devoting years, oh my god, years to watching the show and developing fan theories and getting so invested. Like, Game of Thrones every year is literally, I feel like, almost the biggest event of the season in a lot of people's minds, and on the internet especially. So to have all that anticipation and then eventually just have decided that like, no, none of this matters anymore. I'm just sad. I said it before, I'm just sad. And that's not to say that visually the last season wasn't amazing. There were so many wonderful scenes, like from a cinematography perspective, they were very impressive. Well done, especially in the last episode when they're all walking, like all the Stark children. It was just so well done in that regard. And that's, again, even makes it worse because, you know, the story behind, like, this is just a pretty glamour around the crap story, unfortunately. And also the music, oh my God. Like at the end of the last episode, I was just listening to the music and I almost forgot about the garbage story behind it. I was like, all right, now I'm just listening to and watching the credits roll. I'm just listening to the music and I'm almost happy with the episode. But then obviously I woke up out of my slumber and I was like, oh wait, no, this was garbage. I have a theory that's very far-fetched that George R.R. Martin made the writers of the show do a shit job at the last seasons. Like, he told them to make the first few seasons really, really good, to really grip people, and then just ruin the ending. And that way, when he would finally read the books, they'd sell better. If that does prove to be true, you heard it here first. No, I don't actually think that, but I think it definitely made me more excited to read the books, because even though I know that, again, like books 4 and 5 are slow, very slow, and kind of pointless at times, it doesn't matter at this point. Like, right now, I'd rather take a slow story than a rush story, and that's usually the case for me. Like, I'd rather be slowly coming to a certain place instead of just like forced to go there immediately. At least now, like coming out of the show, I really think I will appreciate the slower pace of the books. At least I hope so. And a lot of people get frustrated at those books, so we don't know. Who knows what's gonna happen, but I'm definitely also gonna listen to the audiobook again to maybe help a bit with that. I think that's where I'm gonna end the video. I don't know, we can chat more in the comments. Yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave comments down below letting me know your own thoughts on the show, on the books, on anything Game of Thrones related at all. I would love to chat with you more. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe. I upload every Tuesday, Friday and Sunday, and I hope to see you very soon with another video. Until then, have a lovely week. Bye!